Albert Einstein, the genius with strange ideas since childhood. Did you know the man who changed the world with the theory of relativity didn't start speaking full sentences until he was almost 4? Yeah, that's Einstein. Most people picture him as the wild-haired professor with a brilliant mind. But behind the famous photos and scientific theories was a quiet, odd little boy who used to talk to himself, softly, in the corner of the room. From the very beginning, Albert Einstein didn't quite fit in. He didn't like school. He hated memorizing. He questioned everything, especially authority. While other kids were out playing, Einstein was sitting alone, staring at light, literally, wondering how fast it traveled. He asked questions adults didn't know how to answer. Not because they were hard, but because nobody ever thought to ask them that way before. Einstein wasn't a genius because he knew more. He was a genius because he thought differently. And that started way back, in his childhood. So today, we're going back to where it all began. To explore not just his ideas, but the strange, stubborn, curious little boy who would grow up to bend time and space. Let's get into it. The quiet boy who saw the world differently. Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, in the city of Ulm, in the Kingdom of Württemberg, in what is now Germany. He didn't look like a future genius. In fact, when he was born, his mother thought his head was too big, and for the first few years of his life, he hardly spoke at all. When he finally started speaking, he would repeat his own words softly, under his breath. People around him thought something might be wrong. But in truth, Albert's mind was simply busy. Busy watching, busy thinking, busy wondering about things most adults ignored. His parents weren't rich, but they supported his curiosity. His father ran an electric equipment company, and young Albert would often watch the machinery, fascinated by how things worked. One day, when he was 5, his father gave him a simple compass. Albert stared at it for hours. The needle kept pointing in the same direction. Even when he moved, something unseen was pushing it. And that idea, that invisible forces could shape the physical world, stuck with him for the rest of his life. By the time he was in school, Einstein didn't do well, not because he was lazy or slow, but because he hated being told what to think. The rigid system, the memorization, the obedience, it all felt wrong to him. He didn't want to repeat facts. He wanted to ask, why? One of his teachers even said, he will never amount to anything. That same boy, years later, would become the most famous scientist of the 20th century. At home, Albert taught himself algebra and geometry. He loved music and played the violin passionately. But what really lit a fire in him was physics, especially when he discovered the writings of Isaac Newton and later James Clerk Maxwell. As a teenager, he moved with his family to Italy. Then later, to Switzerland, where he eventually enrolled at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich. He wasn't a top student there either. Some professors thought he was too rebellious. But again, it wasn't lack of intelligence, it was that Albert simply refused to think inside the box. After graduation, he couldn't get a teaching job, so he worked at the Swiss Patent Office. It turned out to be a blessing. With fewer distractions, he had time to think. And while working a regular 9 to 5, he quietly began reshaping our understanding of the universe. In 1905, something incredible happened. The miracle year. They call it his annus mirabilis, his miracle year. In 1905, at just 26 years old, Albert Einstein published 4 scientific papers. Each one was groundbreaking, and each one would have been enough to make a career. But together, they shook the foundation of physics. 1. Photoelectric effect. He showed that light could behave not just like a wave, but also like particles. This laid the foundation for quantum theory, and it would eventually win him the Nobel Prize. 2. Brownian motion. He provided evidence that atoms and molecules really do exist, something that, surprisingly, was still debated at the time. 3. Special relativity. He proposed that time and space are not absolute. That how fast you're moving affects your experience of both. It changed everything. 4. E equals mc squared may be the most famous equation in the world. It said, mass and energy are the same thing, just in different forms. That tiny amounts of mass could be turned into huge amounts of energy. In 1 year, Albert Einstein changed physics forever. And he did it not in a fancy lab, not with a university title, but at a desk in a patent office. Because what mattered most wasn't where he worked. It was how he thought. And how he thought was unlike anyone else. Fame, fallout, and the fight for peace. By the 1920s, Albert Einstein wasn't just a scientist, he was a global icon. Newspapers called him the new Newton. Crowds gathered wherever he went. People didn't always understand his theories, but they knew one thing. Einstein was changing how we understood the universe. But with fame came pressure and politics. As a Jewish intellectual in Germany, he faced rising anti-Semitism. When the Nazis came to power in 1933, Einstein knew he couldn't stay. He left Europe and settled in the United States. There, he taught at Princeton, but his mind was never far from the world's troubles. Einstein was a pacifist. He hated war. But in 1939, as World War II loomed, something changed. He co-signed a letter to President Roosevelt, warning that Nazi Germany might be developing an atomic bomb. That letter led to the Manhattan Project and the creation of nuclear weapons. Einstein didn't work on the bomb, but after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, he was filled with regret. For the rest of his life, he spoke out against war, against nuclear arms, and for peace. He became a voice of conscience in a world divided by fear. He supported civil rights, opposed racism, and stood beside the oppressed. He believed science should serve humanity, not destroy it. Legacy, what Einstein left behind. Albert Einstein passed away on April 18, 1955, at the age of 76. He died peacefully in Princeton Hospital, having refused surgery that could have prolonged his life. He believed that nature should take its course. But even in death, Einstein's story wasn't over. His brain was removed during autopsy, without his family's permission, by a doctor hoping to understand the roots of genius. That brain would later be sliced, photographed, studied, and even mailed in jars. And yet, no one ever found the secret. Because genius can't be measured in grams of tissue. Einstein's true legacy isn't in his brain. It's in the way he saw the world. He showed us that time and space were not fixed, that energy and mass were connected, that curiosity was more important than obedience, and that questions could be more powerful than answers. He believed in the power of wonder, of imagination, of daring to think differently. He left us more than formulas. He left us a mindset. Today, his name means genius, but his life reminds us, he wasn't born a legend. He was just a boy with big questions, and the courage to follow them. In classrooms, in labs, in quiet notebooks around the world, Einstein's spirit lives on. Not just in what we know, but in how we keep asking, why?